Good morning, you're watching World News and I'm your host, Klaudia Czerwińska. U.S. and Russian officials are holding low-level talks in Istanbul on Thursday. The sides deny, however, that political or security issues, including Ukraine, will be discussed. The U.S. delegation is headed by U.S. Deputy Secretary of State Sonata Coulter, while Russia is represented by its ambassador to the U.S. The talks will cover what the Americans describe as, quote, embassy operations and not bilateral relations as a whole. The Kremlin echoed those statements, adding that Ukraine is, quote, absolutely not on the agenda. Ukraine is open for business. This is the mantra underpinning the two-day EU-Ukraine Business Summit in Brussels, which will host politicians, entrepreneurs, and key movers and shakers. The event kicks off today, and we are joined live by our EU correspondent, Angela Skujins, from the grounds of the gathering. Good morning, Angela. So, how is this conference expected to whip up business interest in Ukraine?
Yes, so the aim of this event today is to demonstrate that Ukraine is open for business. The overall thrust is that to whet the appetite of European investors and to really show that despite Ukraine being in the midst of a war with Russia, that it can be a predictable place to invest if the right opportunities arise. We're expecting a swag of very high profile here today in attendance, such as the EU Affairs Minister for Poland, Adam Szłapka, as well as the EU Commissioner for Enlargement, Marta Kos, as well as the Ukrainian Prime Minister, Denis Shmyhal. Much of the talks, the focus of these talks today will focus on reindustrialization opportunities for Europe once reconstruction starts in Ukraine, as well as opportunities for European businesses to invest as that country steps through the necessary reform processes as part of its EU accession bid. And while the financial matters are very much at the core of these 2 days of talks, it's also an opportunity for the EU to demonstrate that it shows its support to Ukraine not only on the battlefield but in the boardroom. But there's going to be much more of this later today. But that's all from me, and I'll send it back to you in Warsaw.
Angela, please keep us updated as the events unfold. Angela Skujins reporting live from Brussels. On Wednesday, U.S. President Donald Trump suddenly paused part of his sweeping tariffs on global trading partners, even as he raised new tariffs on Chinese goods to 125%. Trump also said he had been thinking about a 90-day pause in the new tariff regime.
For a period of time, I wouldn't say this morning, over the last few days, I've been thinking about it. I've been dealing with Scott, with Howard, with some other people that are very professional. And I think it probably came together early this morning, fairly early this morning. Just wrote it up. We didn't have the use of, we didn't have access to lawyers, or we just wrote it up from our hearts, right? It was written from the heart. And I think it was well written too, but it was written from the heart. It was written as something that I think was very positive for the world and for us. And we don't want to hurt countries that don't need to be hurt, and they all want to negotiate. The only problem is, you can only do so many at one time. We want to do it right.
President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, welcomed Donald Trump's announcement of pausing reciprocal tariffs. In a social media post, von der Leyen said that EU remains committed to constructive negotiations with the U.S. At the same time, she said the bloc will continue diversifying its trade partners.
I welcome President Trump's announcement to pause reciprocal tariffs. It's an important step towards stabilizing the global economy. The European Union remains committed to constructive negotiations with the United States, with the goal of achieving frictionless and mutually beneficial trade. At the same time, Europe continues to focus on diversifying its trade partnerships, engaging with countries that account for 87% of global trade and share our commitment to a free and open exchange of goods, services and ideas.
Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk has said that maintaining close transatlantic relations is a common responsibility of both the EU and the US. In a social media post, the head of the Polish government went on to say that the coming 90 days of US tariff pause should be put to good use by European officials.
Maintaining close transatlantic relations is a common responsibility of Europeans and Americans, regardless of temporary turbulences. So let's make the best of the next 90 days.
The EU is mulling the purchase of more natural gas from the United States amid increasing pressure from President Donald Trump's tariffs. In an interview with the Financial Times, European Energy Commissioner Dan Jørgensen said the bloc may look to buy more liquefied natural gas from America in a bid to alleviate tensions with Trump over tariffs. The commissioner said the move would partly depend on whether more U.S. supplies fit with the EU's renewable energy plans. Earlier this week, Trump suggested the European Union could buy $350 billion of U.S. energy to help reduce its trade deficit. The United States is already the bloc's largest LNG supplier, accounting for 45% of EU imports last year at a value of about $13 billion. At least 12 people have been wounded in a series of Russian air attacks on Ukraine. Officials in Kyiv said on Thursday morning that 2 women were injured when drones started a fire at a storage facility and damaged residential buildings. Authorities recorded 30 drones in the airspace over the capital, 16 of which were destroyed. Overnight attacks also wounded 10 people in the southern city of Mykolaiv. The Russian strikes damaged 9 apartment buildings, garages, and an administrative building. Russia denies targeting civilians in Ukraine, but to date, thousands of ordinary non-military citizens have been killed and injured by Moscow's forces. The equipment doesn't fight, people do, said our guest Marek Świerczyński from Polityka Insight. According to Świerczyński, purchasing the newest and most advanced gear for the army will be meaningless if there will be no soldiers available to use it.
What is the biggest challenge? Mobilizing enough men and women in uniform, or is it more important to become up to date with the quality of military gear?
Whatever gear you buy, you need to have personnel to operate it. Yes,
as the war showed.
The equipment doesn't fight; people do fight. So we need to put more attention to expanding the armed forces themselves in terms of numbers, in terms of personnel. We need to train reserves because, if, God forbid, anything bad happens, your professional army goes first, but then it needs reinforcements from reserve force. And that should be in millions, not in, tens or hundreds of thousands. It needs to be millions for a war like this one happening for 3 years in Ukraine.
So the training that the government recently announced for all...
I'm not quite sure because I guess we haven't yet seen a specific plan for it. Of course, we've heard the statements and we've heard the numbers. Yes, to train 100,000 people per year, which is probably doubling the current figure. I'm wondering, how is this going to happen? When even today, people who are queuing up, and because there is quite a successful recruitment campaign going on in Poland, but there is a problem that the capacity of training centers is too small, and how is the government going to solve this problem? I don't know yet.
So a lot of investment is required for that, in infrastructure, training infrastructure.
Not only infrastructure, but you need to have the trainers, yes, to train the trainees. So probably that was an idea discussed, in military and expert circles. They are going to reach out to the reservists, to the veterans, to those people who have left the armed forces already, but might be willing to maybe not rejoin, but to offer their competence in terms of being trainers.
Right.
To hear more about the military capabilities of European Union members, visit our YouTube channel, where you will find the latest episode of On the Record with Adam Yasser. Poland's President Andrzej Duda and senior government figures are taking part in a series of events on Thursday to commemorate the 15th anniversary of the Smolensk air disaster. Shortly before 9 a.m. local time at Krakow's Wawel Castle, President Duda laid a wreath in front of the tomb of President Lech Kaczynski, who was killed in a crash along with 95 other passengers and crew. Later in the day, Duda will also participate in a wreath-laying ceremony at the monument to the late President Kaczynski in the capital and attend a memorial service. Commemorating the tragedy, Polish Defense Minister Władysław Kosiniak-Kamysz will visit the Powązki Military Cemetery in the Polish capital. There, he and other Polish officials will pay their respects to other civilian and military victims of the disaster. Later in the day, Kosiniak-Kamysz will also lay a wreath at a commemorative plaque in the building of the Polish Ministry of Defense. And as I mentioned just a second ago, today marks the 15 years since the Smolensk air disaster where 96 people, including the then President Lech Kaczynski, were killed when the plane in which they were traveling crashed in Russia.
Rescue crews in western Russia at the scene of the Smolensk air disaster. The Polish Air Force plane crashed short of the runway after hitting trees in thick fog. All 96 passengers and crew died in the disaster, among them the then President Lech Kaczynski and the First Lady. Then Prime Minister Donald Tusk spoke to the nation.
It's one of the greatest tragedies in our nation's history. It's the most tragic event in Poland's post-war history.
The country entered a period of national mourning. Experts have described the disaster as a JFK moment.
The whole of the government apparatus, the cross-party members, the military, armed forces, top brass, were all wiped out in one fell swoop. So the loss of the intellectual caliber of the government was gone in a microsecond.
The flight was transporting dignitaries to a 70th anniversary commemoration of the Katyn massacre, in which some 22,000 Polish officers were slaughtered on Stalin's orders in 1940. Both the Polish and Russian 2011 official investigations found there was no technical fault with the plane. A subsequent 7-year government investigation by Law and Justice, the late President Kaczynski's party, was revoked when it lost power in 2023. The Smolensk tragedy has divided Polish society.
Those who wish to believe the conspiratorial aspect of things, those who accept the findings of the investigations, and it divides families, it divides friendships, and it's still going to be around with us for some time to come.
For the moment, Poland will remember those who lost their lives in one of the country's worst tragedies.
All Lukashenko must do to restart dialogue with Poland is to stop his repressions and release political prisoners, said the Polish Foreign Minister Radosław Sikorski. In an interview with TVP World's sister stations Wodtak, Belsat and Slava, Sikorski said Poland would reciprocate if Belarus took up even a single step toward democracy and rule of law.
Back to the case of Andrzej Poczobut, who never leaves our mind for long. He's not the sole political prisoner in Belarus, but the most important one to us. The Lukashenko regime knows what it must do to unblock political dialogue with our country. They need to stop their repressions, put a halt to the hybrid war on our border, prosecute those responsible for killing our soldier, and we will reciprocate accordingly. I've already said what I have to say. Regimes always seem the most stable right before they collapse. For example, we Poles thought there was no hope, and then in the mid-80s it turned out that freedom was right around the corner. Lukashenko, as Putin's ally in this war of aggression, is also an aggressor for lending Belarusian soil to Moscow for the purpose of waging war. Putin made the gravest mistake of his career, and people surrounding him already know it, but they're too afraid to tell him. That's how it goes in dictatorship. One more year, maybe two, and Russia will really feel the impact of this unparalleled loss of human life and the country's resources.
And so this marks the end of our broadcast, but please do stay tuned. We're back in just a moment here on TVP World with more news and features.